But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down. This matters. It matters because the British public deserve politicians who think the rules apply to them.
Starmer once vowed that if police ever found him guilty of breaking lockdown rules, he would resign. Now, that very promise has come back to haunt him. Evidence has emerged suggesting that Starmer himself may have broken lockdown rules. And this time, people aren't willing to let it slide. The backlash is especially fierce because Starmer was one of the loudest critics of Boris Johnson during the Partygate scandal, which ultimately forced Johnson to resign. Now, many are asking, will Starmer hold himself to the same standard he demanded of others?
Allegra Strachan laughed at breaking the rules. She resigned. The Prime Minister then claimed he was furious at her behaviour and accepted her resignation. Professor Neil Ferguson broke the rules. He also resigned. The Prime Minister said that was the right thing to do. The former Health Secretary broke the rules. He too resigned. The Prime Minister tried to claim he sacked him. Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences?
Now the same scandal is haunting Starmer. But how exactly did he break lockdown laws? Especially when he was so confident he had done nothing wrong. And will he resign, keeping his own word that lawmakers must respect the law or step down? Keir Starmer is now facing what could be the biggest crisis of his political career. And the irony is that it's a scandal of his own making. His entire public image has been built around the idea that he is the responsible, law-abiding alternative to leaders like Boris Johnson, whose own Partygate scandal led to his downfall.
The same rules as everyone else. When my mother-in-law passed away suddenly just before the lockdown, my wife and I were unable to provide her father with the support we wanted to afterwards, because we followed the rules. Barely a day has passed where we haven't agonised over that decision, but we did it because we followed the rules. We all found the rules frustrating at times, and I'm no exception to that.
The irony is that when Starmer made those statements, he must have known he was on shaky ground. At the time, he was at the forefront of demanding Boris Johnson's resignation, insisting that politicians who break the law must step down. But now, those very same accusations are being leveled against him. Starmer's entire argument rested on the claim that he was different, a leader of integrity, someone who followed the rules and held others accountable. But today, if he refuses to resign after being found guilty of breaking lockdown laws, his credibility will lie in ruins.
I'm absolutely clear that no laws were broken. They were followed at all times. I simply had something to eat while working late in the evening, as any politician would do days before an election. But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down. This matters. It matters because the British public deserve politicians who think the rules apply to them. They deserve politicians who hold themselves to the highest standards. And they deserve politicians who put the country first, rather.
Now is the time for Starmer to keep his word. The allegations against him are not just political smears. They are backed by real evidence. On Christmas Eve 2020, when London was under strict Tier 4 lockdown rules, Starmer was caught meeting his voice coach, Leonie Mellinger, in person at Labour HQ in central London. At the time, the rules required people to work from home unless it was absolutely essential. Mellinger had traveled more than 50 miles from Brighton to London, and under any reasonable definition, she would not have qualified as an essential worker.
The issue is that Starmer's voice/comm/acting coach was considered so essential that she qualified as a key worker during COVID. Now look, I don't know about you, but I seem to remember key workers being those who were absolutely pivotal to the continuation of society, not least so people could keep working. Doctors, nurses, train drivers, teachers, the police. I know Boris Johnson infamously called Sir Keir Starmer the human bollard, but surely the Labour leader's ambition to find a bit of character could have waited until after an apparently deadly pandemic.
This is where Starmer's hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore. The same leader who demanded tougher, faster lockdowns and accused the government of ignoring health advice was bending the rules for himself. What makes it worse is that Mellinger had already been working with him remotely in the past. If her coaching could be done virtually before, why was it suddenly essential for her to be there in person? The logic simply doesn't hold up. Starmer tried to spin the story by saying he was preparing a press response to Boris Johnson's Brexit deal and needed his team around him. But that excuse doesn't add up. Millions of professionals adapted to remote work during the pandemic, and a voice coach was never considered essential staff allowed to bypass lockdown rules. Even Labour's own explanations for her presence contradict each other, raising even more doubts about whether Starmer knowingly broke the law.
Of going away. Should Keir Starmer be investigated by the police for allegedly breaking lockdown rules? If there is a police investigation, that he should also promise to resign if he's found to have broken the rules, shouldn't he? Keir Starmer has an unbelievably thin skin, and today you can tell that the revelations that a voice coach and an actress visited him at Labour HQ on Christmas Eve when London was in Tier 4 lockdown.
This story is gaining momentum fast, and it isn't going away. Should Keir Starmer now be investigated by the police for allegedly breaking lockdown rules? And if there is a police investigation, shouldn't he stand by his own words and resign if found guilty? Starmer has a notoriously thin skin, and it shows. The revelation that his voice coach, an actress, visited him at Labour HQ on Christmas Eve, right in the middle of a Tier 4 lockdown in London, has shaken him badly. The most devastating part of this scandal is that Starmer set himself up for failure. When Boris Johnson faced outrage over Partygate, Starmer made it his personal mission to bring him down, insisting that breaking the law, even in minor ways, was reason enough to resign. But now, when asked what he would do under the same circumstances, Starmer has avoided giving a clear answer.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key worker?
Perhaps Starmer has forgotten his own words, that a lawmaker cannot be a lawbreaker and that anyone who breaks the rules should step down. He even went further, boldly promising to resign if he was ever fined for breaching lockdown rules. That promise was easy to make when he was still leader of the opposition with little to lose. But now, as Prime Minister, the stakes are far higher. His critics already point to a pattern of hypocrisy, most famously during the Beergate incident in Durham, where he was photographed drinking beer and eating takeaway with colleagues while COVID rules were still in place. He narrowly escaped consequences then. This time, however, his reputation may not survive.
Looks like, Prime Minister, it looks like there was one rule for you and your lovey mates during COVID and one rule for everyone else. It looks like you wanted to lock us all up, ban us from seeing our grandparents, stop us from visiting dying relatives in hospital, but you could get some has-been actress at your beck and call whenever you wanted. Keir Starmer has developed a reputation with the public for not necessarily always sticking to his word, whether that's with pensioners, waspy women, farmers, securing the border, cutting your energy bills, reducing taxes, you name it. So do you really believe him now? Do we really believe all the rules were followed? Do we believe him when he says this?
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key worker? Of course not, he says, of course not. Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's get the police involved, Prime Minister. After all, we've had 2-tier Keir, now we've got Tier 4 Keir, haven't we? And maybe the Prime Minister should ask for his money back from that voice coach after all.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
The Conservatives wasted no time in seizing on the scandal. Former Conservative MP Richard Holden called for an independent investigation, warning that if Starmer refuses to resign, he will be guilty of the very same double standards he once accused Boris Johnson of. There's no easy way out of this situation. If Starmer continues to insist on his innocence, he risks reinforcing the perception that he is just another politician who believes the rules don't apply to him. Even if he refuses to step down voluntarily, mounting public pressure could still force him out of office. We saw this before with Boris Johnson. When public outrage over Partygate erupted, his approval ratings collapsed, and his leadership quickly became untenable. If the same trend continues for Starmer, as early signs already suggest, he could lose control of the narrative and be pushed aside to protect the Labour Party from collapse. And if major media outlets keep digging into the inconsistencies of his story, this scandal could easily grow into something impossible.
This apparent rule breach from Sir Keir Starmer came during a much more serious time of COVID than his Beergate drama in Durham. Do you remember that? Where he and Labour colleagues, including Angela Rayner, gathered for lagers and curries. Remember this? There he was, the leader of the opposition at the time, swigging from a bottle, raising concerns that he wasn't working at all. He was actually eventually given the all clear by Durham police for that meeting. He got away with it. But all of this matters because Keir Starmer was the first person during COVID to demand the government went harder and faster with draconian.
Another major risk for Starmer is the threat of an internal Labour coup. Many Labour MPs have long harbored leadership ambitions, and this scandal could give them the perfect excuse to strike. Figures like Angela Rayner or Wes Streeting may see an opening to position themselves as alternatives if Starmer begins to look like a liability ahead of future elections. Labour is no stranger to internal power struggles. Rival factions have attempted leadership coups before, and if they sense weakness now, they won't hesitate to seize the opportunity. Another major risk for Starmer is the threat of an internal Labour coup. Many Labour MPs have long harbored leadership ambitions, and this scandal could give them the perfect excuse to strike. Figures like Angela Rayner or Wes Streeting may see an opening to position themselves as alternatives if Starmer begins to look like a liability ahead of future elections. Labour is no stranger to internal power struggles. Rival factions have attempted leadership coups before, and if they sense weakness now, they won't hesitate to seize the opportunity. Another major risk for Starmer is the threat of an internal Labour coup. Many Labour MPs have long harbored leadership ambitions, and this scandal could give them the perfect excuse to strike. Figures like Angela Rayner or Wes Streeting may see an opening to position themselves as alternatives if Starmer begins to look like a liability ahead of future elections. Labour is no stranger to internal power struggles. Rival factions have attempted leadership coups before, and if they sense weakness now, they won't hesitate to.
Nonetheless, I think there is the possibility of severe turbulence ahead. And, there is a group of very, very powerful, probably they've got the intellectual edge at the moment, the Blairites. And I'm thinking of people like Wes Streeting and lots of his allies, Liz Kendall being one of his allies and stuff, inside, the reformers inside government. And there is the soft left, who would probably gather, as it were, under the Angela Rayner banner these days, I think. But Louise Hay would certainly be part of that instinct. And I just really, really hope they don't go to.
Nonetheless, I believe there's a real possibility of severe turbulence ahead. Within Labour, there are powerful factions waiting in the wings. On one side, you have the Blairites, figures like Wes Streeting and his allies, including Liz Kendall and the so-called reformers inside government, whom many argue have the intellectual edge at the moment. On the other side stands the soft left, now largely gathered under Angela Rayner's banner, with figures like Louise Hay representing that tradition. If these groups decide to go to war with each other, it could tear the party apart at the very moment it needs unity the most.
Patrick Maguire's book and Gabriel Pogren's book, which has been serialised in one of the papers today, and it's got a lot of stuff in it, and Leonie Mellinger's obviously getting a fair bit of publicity out of it. Now look, Keir Starmer said without any equivocation, if the police found him guilty and he was received an official caution or any form of judgment, he would resign.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he'd do the same thing now, because you cannot say he's anything.
If I am fined by the police for Beergate, he was called Cormac-Keir, Beer-Keir at the time.
Whatever,
He got away with it. He did say, as you said, I'll resign. So you think now, even though he's Prime Minister, he would still resign?
As far as I'm concerned, that from what I know of the man, if this is a real breach of the law and if he is found guilty of it, then he would certainly consider his position.
I highly doubt that. Absolutely.
I don't doubt it for a minute.
Keir Starmer, after only 6 months into being Prime Minister, just going to let it all go,
equally
step down because of this.
But you honestly...
let's
find out.
He didn't resign when we had the whole Lord Ali saga.